All right, thank you for the intro. So my name is James Fazio. I'm the co-founder and lead the engineering and product at Flume Water. We're a company actually located here in San Luis Obispo. I thought it would just make sense just to give you a quick little background on what our company actually does, kind of give perspective and context to the rest of the conversation. So at Flume, this is our mission statement. You can't manage what you can't measure. Our mission is to empower people and communities to understand how we use water by liberating the data behind it. So how did we actually do that? We created a water sensor. So it's a single sensor that you put on your house's water meter, and it can monitor the entire property's water usage from that one point. It's super easy to install, doesn't require any pipe cutting. Anyone can do this. And yeah, it's a plug and play system that lets homeowners actually understand how water is being used in the home. So how it actually works. So like I said, the sensor is on your house's water meter. We send all of this water usage data up to the cloud. And the way customers actually interact with this is on a mobile app on their phone. So you can imagine you're getting a push notification if some abnormal water usage is going on. You can set budgets, you can do all sorts of stuff. But what we also do with this data is it becomes super powerful at aggregate, say across an entire water utility, across the entire region, across an entire state. We're able to paint pictures on how water actually gets used, depending on weather, depending on things like COVID, depending on all these other factors. And we aggregate, anonymize, and sell this information back to water agencies, states, and other industries. So some pretty cool stats about our product. 66% of users, once they install Flume, feel less of a need to call their water utility if something goes wrong. And 67% of customers discover a leak within the first month of use, which sounds like it would be impossible, but that's actually how frequent water leaks are across homes. This could be an actual leak that's going on. It could be someone just left a hose on outside and they forgot about it. This type of stuff happens all the time. Another super common one that we see when this device gets installed is something like a toilet flapper is stuck and it's been going on for years. And just that alone can save your house, a couple $100s a year. Our app's pretty extensive in what you can actually do with the information. So of course we do leak detection. You can actually view your water usage in real time. It updates every 30 seconds if water is running. We actually use machine learning AI to break down your appliances. So you can see your water usage by shower, by dishwasher, by outdoor water usage. And then we allow customers to customize all sorts of stuff so they can set budgets. How much water do you want to use for the month or for a week, and get alerts relevant to those budgets. What's also really cool is when customers install our device, on average, we see a 15% reduction in water usage across their home, which can result in 20,000 gallons per year on kind of the normal water usage across the US. It's pretty powerful. And just a quick note, I mentioned on one of the earlier slides, utilities are also leveraging this data to better understand and manage residential end use and efficiency, improve their forecasting and advanced planning as well. The cool thing about our data is this data set doesn't exist in terms of like high def water usage at the kind of infrastructure level. The best you can possibly find, like if a utility has the most advanced technology available today, is usage at about the day level, and it's typically delayed about a day too. Utilities really don't even know how to work with that data. They're typically used to having data once per month per house, and that really doesn't paint a picture of how water is being used. You can see general trends, but it's really hard to see what's going on below that. And some of the stuff that we do for utilities and other customers at this aggregate data level is indoor and outdoor analysis, seeing what percentage of water is going to indoors versus outdoors. We marry this data to home characteristics, so you can see what's going to happen if I do a development of 500 new homes. How's that going to affect our water usage? How do old homes use water compared to new homes? What does it look like if you have a big yard versus a small yard? We do leakage analysis, and then we also do this at kind of appliance breakdown level at the aggregate. So you can actually see like what percentage of homes in your area have water softeners, which can be important for a water utility because that can adjust salt levels within the water that's going back into the sewer, all sorts of stuff that's relevant to them. Some metrics, so these are a little outdated. We're actually close to about 200,000 devices distributed across the US and Canada. We have very high NPS. We're highly reviewed across all the places that we sell. We've got over 50 utility partnerships. We've got a lot of data customers as well. When the last time that I wrote this, which I think was the end of last year, we were at about 15 billion gallons measured, which is the equivalent of Whale Rock Reservoir, which is in Cayucos, which basically feeds all of San Luis Obispo. And we've calculated that we've saved about close to 4 billion gallons of water usage that would have been wasted otherwise. Just a quick history on our first couple of years. This only goes up to 2019, but we started actually as like a lot of companies that are in the accelerator here as a senior project at Cal Poly. We also participated in Innovation Quest that same year. I believe we got second place. We did the accelerator that same year. And it was pretty funny because I think at the halfway point, all the advisors voted on which teams they thought would succeed and which teams they thought would not. And we were the second most likely to fail. And I think we're one of the only ones that are actually around today. Pretty early on, we sold our first prototype to community members in San Luis Obispo. We were actually able to use a lot of homes in town to gather a lot of initial data and help us with our R&D. We did some patent filing in 2015. And then 2016 was really the first year that we started getting serious. That's when we raised our first seed round. That's when we actually were showing interest with both water utilities and insurance companies. And we were able to use this interest to actually help us raise money. We had actual LOIs from major, both water utilities and major insurance companies that helped went a very long way in raising that initial first $1 million. In 2018 was when we actually first launched our first product, the Flume One. And then the next year was when we launched our first major utility programs. And then that was enough for us to raise, I call it our first like big round of funding, which was in 2019. Since then, we've come a really long way. The last couple of years, we've really started to focus on efficiency and being as close as profitable as we can, and continuing down that path, like while sustaining growth. I think that's getting more and more important for startup companies, as it a lot more important than it used to be in kind of the era from 2015 to 2020. And we've actually shifted a lot of our focus to the insurance market. We have a very large value proposition for insurance companies. You saw the stats. What we can actually show is when customers install our device, they're about 70% less likely to have a claim than without our device. Water claims are actually the most expensive claim in home insurance. It beats out fire and theft. So there's quite a few creative business models that can be done where the insurance company actually pays for the device, pays for monitoring, and the end homeowner doesn't have to pay anything. So we'll be launching actually a couple programs starting next year, well, actually as soon as this year, with some major insurance companies doing a sort of new business model where the homeowner pays nothing and the insurance company is kind of our single customer for all their policyholders. So that's kind of where we're heading. Is there any questions just on the general before I go into kind of 10 pieces of advice I have on the actual company itself?
On one of the previous slides, you had something that was like 65 NPS.
Yeah.
What's an NPS?
Oh, sorry. NPS is Net Promoter Score. It's a common way that our companies will measure how much the customer enjoys the product, enjoys the company. And the way it's usually measured is, I'm sure you've seen these surveys by almost every product you use. You'll get an email that says, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend Flume to a friend? To put it in perspective, that's a scale of -100 to 100. I think like some of the best companies in the world, NPS wise, like Apple is like at 70. The average of companies is around 20, 30. And some of the bad, like airline companies you're going to find like -20 probably.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
All right. Kind of put together just 10 what I call startup commandments. I think these are fairly relevant to the early days of starting a company. I tried to make these as general as possible because obviously every company is going to be different. Every market's going to be slightly different, but I think these can apply to most early stage companies. We can just go into these kind of one at a time. And these are in no particular order. I think these are all important. Just because this is number one, I don't think this is actually the most important one. You must be passionate about the problem you're solving. I think people can fake it for a period of time. But when things actually get tough in a company, and there's, of course, going to be lots and lots and lots of tough times, the passion is something that actually can help you get through that. Because if you're really committed to solving a problem, all these, roadblocks, these rejections, they're gonna suck, but it's gonna be easier to overcome if you truly do have that commitment. Like you're like, I'm gonna solve this problem, like kind of no matter what. It really, really will get you through the tough times. And you see it all the time. You see people that fake this all the time. And typically those are the companies that maybe they can have some initial success, but eventually it's going to come back to bite them. And on the problem side, you have to be solving a big enough problem. You also have to be able to articulate this problem clearly. If you can't explain the problem within, call it 1-2 sentences, you have to go kind of back to the drawing board to make sure that it's something that's very easy to understand. And when I say big has lots of different definitions depending on what you're trying to do, depending on what kind of company that you're trying to start. Like if you're planning to take on, say, venture money, that problem has to be very big because just the venture economics is they're making big bets across the board. They want to see literally 100 times, 100 times, 100x on their returns. And if there's not that potential there, and if you're not articulating the problem and you're not saying that this problem is big enough for that even to happen, like you're kind of dead in the water. But if what you're trying to do is more of a business that can support yourself, you're looking for something, maybe you're starting it on the side and eventually it becomes your main thing. Big is a very different definition. You want to make sure that big at scale, that you can be making enough money to support and support yourself, support your employees, and actually be something that's viable. I know this gets drilled in a lot, especially at Cal Poly programs, but this is an extremely important one. You have to validate and validate your hypothesis with customer development. Um, and your family and friends are not source of customer development. That's such a big red flag. Like you're like, oh yeah, well, my friend's dad said that this product is great. He's loving it. Of course, they're going to tell you they're loving it. They're not going to be telling you the hard truth. You really have to do customer development with people that don't have like a personal relation to you. You want the honest feedback. You want to hear the hard truths. Like without this, it can really tailor your product in the wrong way. So you want to make sure you're getting the right feedback from the right people. It's not to say that you can't start maybe initially with friends, family, but you have to take friends, family, say, is there anyone else that you think I could talk to? And then you have to go that level. And then you have to go, is there anyone that you would recommend I talk to? And maybe go 2 or 3 levels deep to actually get the feedback that's going to be meaningful for your business. There's another big one. I know this one's sort of cliche. And on the flip side, like my background's in engineering, so as an engineer, this is sometimes hard to hear, but it really is true. And building a business is you have to sell before building. You can waste a lot of time with assumptions. It can be extremely dangerous. In that customer development, this is where you should be finding these kind of nuggets of information and then kind of using these nuggets that you're finding in that process to then repitch the product. Before, you have it fully fledged out, if you're starting to hear the same thing over and over again, use that in your pitch the next time when you're talking about your product. I mean, you can fake a lot of it initially with demos. There's so many good tools now for making great design mocks that look like the actual product. You can build those out very easy before you kind of even write a single line of code or develop a piece of hardware. This is going to be extremely important, and I think it goes hand in hand with the customer development one as well. This one also, I think it seems obvious, but I see this so many times, especially with companies that are just starting. There has to be a path to customer paying to have the problem solved. And when I say this, your initial pitch of the solution should be enough for someone to want to pay for it. All the bells and whistles that are going to come on top, like that's great. You're gonna be able to kind of take that product and build it into something that really is truly great. But just the initial solution that you're pitching should be enough for someone to pay. So, if I come to you and I say like imagine, before Salesforce, like if I came to you and said like, hey, I have a way to organize your contacts and you'll be able to message them and keep track of them. Like that should be enough where you're like, oh yeah, I would pay for that. Like I'm not explaining you how it's going to work. I'm not explaining you kind of like the details. That has to be there. Oh yeah, sorry, there's a question.
Oh. Oh, wrong person. Thank you.
Can you elaborate, maybe on kind of this one and a little bit before too, like
Yeah.
for your personal situation, like what did you need to have in place
Yeah.
to get those original LOIs?
Exactly.
And like which customers were you building around, old homes, new homes, multifamily, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So yeah, I think this is great because we can actually use an example for both of these. For Flume, when we had our initial, actually, let's go back to this one. When we would explain the concept to homeowners, and this was in 2015, so we have to take a little bit of context there. This is when there was a major drought going on. Water bills were very expensive. And this was actually when utilities started fining users for going over a certain allocation of usage. So what we saw was, okay, people are getting fined, people are going over, water bills are extremely expensive, especially in the Southwestern US. That was our initial target market. We started talking to homeowners like, hey, if there was a way where you could just access the water information on your phone in real time, is that something that you would pay for? Not even talking about the details of like how this works. And that was enough. People go, oh my God, like I've been trying to find something that does this. Or we'd hear the feedback, oh yeah, I've been actually looking into products. The products that I found do this, and I don't like that. So, and when I say I don't like that, maybe it was, I have to call a plumber to come and install something. It's be too expensive. Like, yeah, if something was maybe in the few $100 range, that is something that I would buy. So we started to get all this feedback that kind of like was almost giving us like a roadmap of like what to build out. And then what we would actually do is we would sign people up. So we would say, that's great. We're building something that meets kind of your needs. There's an actual value proposition here. Will you pay us, kind of prepay us, and you can be one of the first testers of our product? So we actually got people that we didn't have any relationship with to pay us to actually show like, okay, there's a problem here. Okay, people are actually willing to pay for it. And of course, for this differs significantly from market to market, from type of customer, type of company. Like we were building something that was initially direct to consumer. It's a lot different than say building like an enterprise SaaS solution. Like the playbook's going to be quite a bit different, but the general sort of sense, like you could think of like, imagine an enterprise SaaS customer, you were booking demos for a product that maybe doesn't even have code behind it, but you're able to walk someone through screens and people are telling you, oh yeah, I like this piece of it, or I like this piece. Or in those conversations, people's eyes are going to light up when it's something that actually matters to them. And those are kind of the things that you need to hone in on. You should be able to tell with talking to people because they really do kind of change the tone and how they're talking if you hit on something. Yeah, oh my God, yeah, that's actually something I've been looking for. This is something I need. I've been trying to find a solution for that. Those are all the kind of things that you want to be hearing. And then on this one too, like our first products that we were like, because we were selling like our prototypes, they were terrible. I mean, like we would go out, we'd have to install it ourselves. The thing would work for like 3 days. We'd have to go back. We'd have to work with the customer. We'd have to like let them know, like, hey, we're working on this. Like, thank you so much for, helping us get through this. We're of course going to get you the latest, greatest when it comes to market. Everything's going to be free for you for the rest of, all of our versions. But you're going to have to work with us on this initial part. And if you're solving that problem that's so big for them, they're not going to really care. They're going to be like, okay, that's fine. And that's where you'll kind of find that initial success. The second one too on this point is recurring revenue. I think this is pretty well drilled into companies now. Like the business model has to have some aspect of whether once they purchase one thing, they're going to be purchasing something else in the future. Or it's a model like a software model where they're paying you monthly or annually, or it's a model where you're selling them one thing and then there's like the Keurig model where you buy the coffee machine and they get it in the pods. There has to be some model like this. And I think early on when we started, we always struggled with this. And I think this was one of our biggest mistakes early on, is not figuring that out initially. So like early on, we would sell our product. It was like a one-time sale. Once a customer had our product, there was really no reason for them to purchase something else from us. It's pretty hard to build a business on that. We have since found ways to actually make recurring revenue on kind of on top of what we're doing. But I think the sooner that you can figure this out, the easier your path is going to be. And I think the more likely you're going to find success in whatever market you're in. This one too, I'm sure you've heard some version of this before, but finding an unfair, and I say it in quotations, advantage in distribution is typically, if not always, more important than the quality of the product. You can build a great product and you can have a great small user base, but if you do not have a way to distribute this product that's scalable, it's going to be very, very tough to find any sort of meaningful scale. I think you can kind of see this all the time. Depending on the market, there's so many different ways that you can go about this. For Flume, like when we started the company, we're like, yeah, it's gonna be great. Like we'll just put it on Amazon, we'll put it on our website. Like it's a big enough problem, people will come and buy it. Sure, some people will come and buy it. You can do your typical sort of, Google marketing, Facebook marketing to drive customers to your website. But all that stuff is so expensive. So we started looking at ways, well, how do we find customers, or how do we find some like unfair way to contact people to let them know about our product or give them a good deal? And that's where we kind of found two markets that we can actually use this. So the first one on water utilities. So we have lots of good relationships now with water utilities, and I'll just use Los Angeles as an example. So Los Angeles Department of Water and Power is actually the biggest water utility in the United States. And we have a deal with them where any customer in Los Angeles can get our product at, I think it's $25 when we typically retail for $249. The utility pays us on the back end for every device that is sold. So that in itself is good. But what's really good is when we do these programs, we go to the utility and the utility will actually market to their entire customer base. And they have the email of most of the customers in their district. It's also the water utility reaching out, not Flume reaching out, this unknown company, but someone that they actually have a relationship with. So customers in Los Angeles, a couple times a year will get an email from LADWP saying, hey, we have this great program. It's a super good deal. Click here to buy. And then we walk them through that process. And when we run these email campaigns, they cost $0 to us. And when we do like Los Angeles as an example, in a single day, that can be more impactful than like an entire month of like traditional channels of just doing Facebook marketing or Google SEO or things like that. So these distribution channels are going to be, of course, different depending on the market. This is just one example that's for us. The other one that I started talking on was the insurance channel, where even better, we're working on deals now where insurance companies who have way more customers than water utilities, you can think of some of I believe the top 10 insurance companies insure 85% of the US. So when you're talking about how many customers they have, it's typically in the millions or tens of millions. Getting a program going with them where they can message their customer and say, actually, this product's gonna be free. We're paying for everything. Click here and we'll ship you a device. That type of channel it makes everything else irrelevant. It makes the whole kind of reason to do D2C almost not even worth it. So these are the types of channels that like you have to find. You have to be creative. You have to really understand the market that you're going in to even be able to find these. Sometimes they're not obvious, sometimes they are. And when they are obvious, that can mean that they're actually going to be probably trickier to crack because there's probably lots of other companies that are trying to go in that same channel. But I think the more creative you can be here, the more success you're going to have. I think this is another common one too. Position your company to take advantage of luck. If it is too good to be true, a lot of times it is. But in that 1% time where it is not too good to be true and it is actually true, you have to be ready to execute on that opportunity. This is true with, I think, almost every company. I think every company has some sort of, at least a couple things that they can point to where they've been working towards something and then something finally opens up, which could be, I think, typically said as like, well, that was a very lucky scenario. But I think as long as you're executing and you're ready to take advantage of a scenario that presents itself, this could be the game changer. This could be the difference between succeeding and failing. And yeah, you have a question?
In what you were talking about marketing direct to insurance companies or water utilities, how did your, I guess your sales would obviously change. You're talking to a couple of people in a room rather than a bunch of people online or in person. How did the product change? I know you have Flume kind of on the cover of it. Was there any way that you changed your product in terms of, shape, size, color, to go to these companies instead of people?
Yeah, in our case, the actual product itself, if you're talking about like the hardware component of it, actually has not changed that much. It's more pitching it and like in the insurance case, finding, this information that water damage is the highest claim that they pay out. And then for us, one of the big things that we had always said was like, oh man, if only we just had access to claim data. So, and then marrying that with our data. So if we could say a given 1,000 users, let's say they all installed our device in 2023, and we had the date of installation. And then we took another group of 1,000 users who didn't install Flume. If we could actually look at the claims, then we'd actually be able to pitch this to insurance companies with some data behind it. But you can't just get this data. It's all very private to the insurance company itself, right? But we were able to convince a couple insurance companies to run this study with their own data where we gave them installation dates and then they gave us claim data, and we were able to show this kind of relationship. So it was less about like tailoring the product for the industry, but more finding the pieces that we could use to pitch that industry on our product. This is also not the same for every industry. I think it's the way we designed our product was to be fairly general use. But I think if and when we see more success, say in the insurance world, it becomes less about the actual water monitoring and more about the leak detection. So that's where we do start to think about, okay, how do we start tailoring our front end experience on the app to be more focused around leak detection and making sure we're having super high detection rate. We're not having that many false positives. How do we build the interface so that people understand what's going on, and how do we make that experience better for that market? So on the actual hardware side, it's kind of doing the same thing it's always been doing, but thinking about, yeah, how do you pitch it for the different markets? And then there may be minor tweaks that kind of a couple stacks up, like at the software level in our case.
Did your revenue model change at all? Could you start charging these larger companies,
Yeah.
software?
Yeah. So like today you can buy our device on Amazon, one-time cost, $249. And that's still something that is like a solid business for us. And the utility model, a lot of the times the way it works is the utility is paying us a portion, customers paying us a portion. Then ultimately we're selling this aggregate data back to the utility. And then there's some sort of 1 year, 2 year, 3 year contract on that data. But the insurance model, that's an interesting one where the homeowner pays nothing, the insurance company pays for the device, and then they pay for what we call monitoring as long as that device is online. So like kind of like a monthly or annual cadence. So it's in that case, it's having one customer that could be across tens or hundreds of thousands of customers. Yeah.
I have a similar question. When it comes to the direct customer,
Mhm.
do you sell them their data or do they purchase it once and then they have access to the data?
Customers don't have to pay any recurring. Once they have the data, it's theirs forever. We actually did experiment 2 years ago with a model like that. So if you're familiar with any smart home products that are either a video service or like a doorbell service. So I think a good example is like Ring. Ring, you buy the doorbell or buy the video camera. There's a basic set of features. But if you want like to be able to view videos from a week ago, you have to pay their monthly subscription. So we tried a model like that, where customers would get a basic set of features and they would have to opt in for an annual subscription to get the full-fledged services of the app. We actually did show some success there, but at the time, we just decided ultimately that we never really wanted to. Consumers hate consumer subscription models. I mean, it's no secret. I hate them. Like anytime I see that on an app, I'm like, oh my God, I'm just going to delete this thing. So we made kind of the tough decision to reverse it back to just the one-time purchase. And we're like, okay, we know we're going to be able to figure this out in different markets, in different channels, but this is not the one that we want to use. Because what started happening was bad reviews started coming in. People were unhappy, like our NPS was going down, and it was making it harder to kind of pitch the business to different channels, pitch the product to different channels, where we thought there could be once we unlocked it, a much more solid revenue stream than just trying to charge consumers.
Okay, follow-up question. What's your data storage and data management system? Is it in-house or do you use like another company?
Yeah, we do all of our engineering, all of our storage in-house. I mean, to say in-house, I mean, we run everything on the cloud. So we use mostly Google's services. So we're on GCP for everything.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah.
Let's go through it. Thank you.
This one's an important one too. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Leverage networks. And really, entrepreneurs are almost always willing to help other entrepreneurs. There's been so many times where in the early days, I would just shoot a message like on LinkedIn or find an email of someone in a relevant company. So maybe it was a smart home company that was doing subscriptions. I would just find who's their product person, who's their tech person, and I'd send a message maybe to each of them, like being like, hey, like, we're in similar fields. I'm looking for advice on how to do this. And a lot of the times you'll actually get a response and actually be able to talk to people that you may have zero connection to. Yeah, it's great if you can find someone that knows that person. I think that's like kind of like the typical way of doing something where you can actually get a warm intro. But a lot of the times, I think you'll be surprised. If you're not trying to sell something, if you are just trying to look for advice, people are very willing and open to talk and actually enjoy having these conversations. And you'll learn so much in one or two of these conversations. Then potentially, I mean, you could learn more from two conversations than I think reading an entire book on like one of these subjects, because you're talking to people that have the actual experience. they actually built something, it's actually relevant to your industry, and they're gonna maybe tell you stuff that they wouldn't otherwise say, like if they were in like a public forum or somewhere where they're trying to paint everything in a very positive light. I think this is underused big time. Also, like, I think in the early days of starting a company, this is kind of like uh, sort of relevant to this. I just would always be wary if you're working like with an advisor that's charging for their time in the early days of company construction. You should be able to talk to people, especially bounce ideas off of people for no charge. There should be people that are willing to do this. Like, I'm always super wary if I hear someone is like paying someone for like their time and kind of their opinions on a matter. This is not to say as your company becomes larger that of course there can be relationships where maybe you find the person and it's like this one person and that person does charge for their time. Okay, that can make sense. But really in the early days, especially pre-revenue, I would just be wary of this always. That's some people may disagree with that, but that's kind of my experience. And then this, of course, is back to company creation as well too. When you're finding founders, they have to have that same sort of passion that we talked about in the first point, and they have to be aligned with vision. You want to find people that have skills that complement your own. And the most important thing is the communication line between your founders has to be so open and honest. Like, if you end up in a scenario where you have a founder that's going to take offense to, like, you say, actually, I think maybe we should do it this way, and here's why. And their reaction is like, they're taking offense or they don't want to hear any sort of feedback, or it's kind of like my way or the highway. Just run. I mean, like, it's not worth trying to build a business where there are these kind of hesitations that you have in the early days. Things are only going to get way tougher, way harder. The decisions are going to have way more consequence as you start building the company. So I think if you can find a founder where the communication lines are great, and let's say you have maybe the skills on say you're building a software project, maybe your skills are on software development or product development or product design, and your founder's skills are more on the business development or relationships with customers, or they're really good at pitching. Those are the types of relationships that you want to have. You don't necessarily want to have like two people that have kind of the exact same skill set. It's very repetitive, especially when you're trying to be cash efficient early on. You want to have between as few as people as possible, the most skills possible. That's always what you want to be optimizing for. And yeah, I think I think this gets said a lot, but I think startups, building a business, it's all the time, it's romanticized. I mean, any article you read is always going to be about the great big successes. But the reality is it's really hard. There are almost always no easy paths. And the highs get higher as you build a business, but the lows also get lower. You know, a problem in the early days of a company may seem significant at the time, but in the grand scale of things, like as you start to build and scale, it almost becomes like those problems become almost meaningless compared to the problems that you're going to be dealing with later on. I can tell you, and you can listen to people say this, I think it's kind of hard to like comprehend and understand until you've actually like been through it. But just know that this is not an easy path. It's much easier to go the traditional route of, you know, working for a company and getting promoted within that company and taking a more traditional path as opposed to trying to do something on your own. It's about as hard as it gets, I feel like. So just understand that. And yeah, that's kind of the 10 pieces of advice that I have. Thank you.
I have a couple questions, or I have some questions for you, and then we can open it up. And if there's any follow-up questions from anything I ask, feel free to raise your hand. I can throw this microphone towards you. But kind of going off of your last point, walk us through the early days of Flume. Like what were some of your initial challenges, whether I don't know, I'm making assumptions, but like whether it's on your team or time, and what decisions led you to, or what led you to making the decision to pursue this full time?
Yeah, I think what kept, because yeah, early days it was really hard, and actually the technology that we had to develop was also very difficult. We had to build our own communication protocol because we were dealing with such a wide range of how our product could be installed. We had to deal with being in environments that are typically products don't exist in. Like a lot of times our product is installed in a meter pit, which is in a cement box that has a metal lid that fills up with water, that has extreme temperature curves. There was so many technical challenges in the early days that a lot of times I think we looked at it and we're like, maybe we just give up. But what continued to get us through was we had all these people that were paying us for these really crappy versions of our product. And every time we would explain the product to almost anyone that owned a home, like in the Southwest, people were like, oh, yeah, like that is something that I'm interested in. We just had so much momentum and so much positivity on that side that it kept getting us through. And back to sort of the passion thing, like we saw how easy it is to waste water. I'm not even talking about being efficient. I'm just talking about just waste in general. Like water's just going down the drain, like your toilet's just stuck open, or your irrigation schedule is going on every single night and you have no idea about it. And it's been happening for 4 years. Like that adds up. And we just felt like there needed to be a solution for this market. Like we saw such a big gap that we saw a big opportunity. We saw all this positivity, even though it was really hard on a technical side and really hard to go out and pitch our business because a lot of investors won't touch hardware at all. We just continued to kind of just grind through it.
Awesome. I'm glad that getting second most likely to fail
Yeah.
during the accelerator didn't deter you guys
Yeah,
from
well,
continuing.
we didn't really, I feel like it was just because our presentation was so bad. Cause like, honestly, we were so focused on just building the product and trying to like make our initial customers happy
Yeah.
that like all the other stuff didn't matter at that time.
Okay. Did they give you an award for that?
No, but I don't even know why they told us that. I don't think they do that like normally.
It's great character building.
Yeah.
Great character
Yeah.
building. When it comes to, so you talked about partnerships like with the LA Department of Water and Power, congratulations on that, and insurance companies. What advice would you give to startups who are also looking to pursue partnerships similar to that in their industries?
Yes. So there's a few pieces of advice for that. Early on, before like we even had a brand or like anyone knew what Flume was, we would use this technique, at least with like insurance companies, where we would look at their board of directors and we would find, typically on these big companies, there's going to be some academic on the board of directors. So it'd be like, I don't know, the chancellor at whatever school or some professor in something. And we would target those people And we would play the research student angle big time with them. So we would like kind of research them. What do they care about? What do they like? And we would use, like in the insurance case, we had all this data to back up what we were doing. Talk about water damage being like the highest, most expensive claims for home insurance. And we play this kind of like almost student angle. And we actually had a lot of success going that angle, starting at the board level, seeing where we could get. And then usually that person would be like, okay, forwarded. And they would forward us on to like maybe the head of claims or the VP of risk solutions or whatever. We were actually able to get into these insurance companies using kind of like that technique. I think as we started to expand our brand, especially on the water utility side, because that's kind of like a unique world all in itself. We started working with people that had lots of experience in that industry. So people that had worked for utilities or worked for other companies that were selling into water utilities that already had lots of relationships. We started leveraging either employing those people as contractors or eventually bringing them in as full time to kind of like establish these relationships that we didn't necessarily have. And then another big thing that we would do early on, and we still do today, is find the specific conferences that are going to have the highest sort of ROI. And it can be hard to find which conferences are going to be the ones that lead to the most connections, especially when you're like new into an industry. So sometimes you have to end up going to all of them, and you don't necessarily have to have a booth or anything, but just go to them, go and talk to as many people as possible. And those are actually extremely effective, especially when you have like nowhere to start from. And then once you find out which conferences, okay, this one is worth going to, this one's not worth going to, actually dedicate some money, resources to having a presence at that conference, having a booth, whether you're trying to get a talk at one of these conferences, that can actually be super efficient in terms of like cash spent to how many connections you can get out of it.
So, in regards to AI, I feel like that's a word that gets thrown around a lot, especially right now. What challenges, if any, did you face integrating AI and machine learning into a consumer-facing product?
Yeah, so, well, our product's been using machine learning now for 4 or 5 years. So I guess before, this was when you used the word machine learning before you used the word AI, and now they've all kind of combined into one term, even though I feel like they have pretty significant differences. But so in terms of our use case for machine learning, we have two. One is on our leak detection side. So in the leak detection space, a leak is pretty simple. It's either water is on or water is off, right? And in the leak scenario, if you see water that is just always on and doesn't go back down to zero, you probably have some sort of leak. Now, finding out the right amount of time to fire off a notification while balancing not being annoying to the user and detecting, like, let's say every time your irrigation went off, we sent you a leak notification. You're going to get super frustrated.
Right.
And you're probably going to end up disabling it.
Right.
So that's where we had to start using machine learning to figure out what is the optimal way to look at that window. How can we filter out events that are also long running, but not necessarily leaks? So you can think of like irrigation systems or someone filling up a pool or water softeners. These are all things that can last a couple of hours and constantly use water usage, but a customer is not going to want to get notified of that. So that's the first kind of application that we used. And that's a fun one to build into a product because it's a lot of fine tuning. It's getting a lot of feedback. It's not going to be the same for every customer. You kind of have to find what matters to the most amount of people. And you have to be really careful that you're not tailoring your product to the superpower users of your app, because the superpower users of the app may have a lot of great feedback, but it's probably stuff that's not relevant for the rest of your customer base. The general customer base, they want to set something up, never configure anything, and just it works. Like maybe they can go in and adjust something, but the normal user is not going to want to touch any configurations, any buttons. Whereas the super users are like, well, why don't you build out these things where I can put into the app and tell you all this stuff? And it's like, that's great, but it's not applicable to our whole customer base. The other area we use it is in the way we break down appliance water usage. So what we do is we do it once a day. So once a day across our entire system, we look at the last 24 hours of water usage for every customer, and we run it through a series of models to basically say, okay, these are showers, these are irrigation systems, and we start pulling things out, and then we go, okay, these are toilets, or this is something that has more cycles, so this is probably either a washer machine or a dishwasher, and then we kind of fine tune that and build a model around that as well. And that's another thing too. We have ways in our app where customers can provide us feedback, and it will tune each person's model a little bit better. But a lot of the times people don't want to do that. So you have to make sure that you are spending most of your product development for the most amount of people and not for the power users. And I think that, especially with something like machine learning AI, that's where you can run into, I think, a lot of issues, is spending too much time building out one specific thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any questions from the audience? Yes.
How does building out one feature or one aspect of your product change if you're going towards your larger customers, like the insurance companies or the utilities?
Yeah, so like for utilities, the products that we're actually building out for them, since it's more on the data and aggregate and anonymized side, it's not actually something that we have to do for our customer, like our general homeowner that's actually using our product. It's like a different suite of products. And the utilities, they may have certain suggestions of things that we should do in the app. Sometimes we take those suggestions, sometimes we don't. And then back to what I was saying earlier, like in the insurance market, where everything is all about leak detection, that's where we may tune some of our features to be more around that and less around general just water usage and how water is being used in the home.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So thanks for the presentation. Great job and really interesting. Going back to when you talked about going to the recurring revenue model for residential, you had mentioned that some of the negative reviews had bumped up. Not to pick a scab, but what were some of those, just out of curiosity?
Well, so with this, where this model exists in the smart home, where people buy a product, there's basic features, and then they opt in for like a premium set of features, it's almost always around like storage, like, and like video storage. So a lot of times people are able to pitch this model because they're like, yeah, video storage is expensive. Like I get that. Like I understand. It's like, okay, yeah, I get like storing gigabytes of video that costs money. Like that model is very established. In the water world, since there's so few products that are doing water monitoring, there aren't any consumer subscription models already. So when you take something and let's say you can't do the model where it's like the video model where it's like, well, yeah, your water usage data, you have to pay to access that in the past because it costs a lot of money. And people are like, what do you mean it's water usage data? It's like, that costs nothing. So then you have to kind of like, well, you get your basic feature set and then here's your premium feature set. And yeah, a lot of the reviews that came up is like, I'm having to pay again to access my own data, or this app's incomplete without having to buy the subscription. The subscription's a scam. I didn't know about the subscription. Like there's hundreds of reviews that are relevant to that. Yeah. And if you look at any product that has a subscription on Amazon and you go and look at reviews, you're going to find this type of negativity for sure. And Amazon is, I hope like in a year or 2 years that we're not on Amazon anymore. Amazon's like the worst. I mean, yes, we make enough money there that it's worth it, but it's such a horrible channel. I mean, the margins that you make on Amazon are bad. They don't let you, the customer experience is bad because when a customer orders a product on Amazon, you don't actually have their information. So you can't actually be contacting them. They don't really exist in your system until like they start installing. So you have no relationship with them from like the product has been shipped or delivered, or here's a reminder to install. Whereas if like when we do all these programs with utilities or insurance or on our own website, we own the customer all the way through the stack, and we can have better installation rates. We can have a better experience. We can address things if there's issues. Amazon like takes all of that out, and it's this super frustrating channel. Yeah, on Prime Day. Yeah.